My parents told everyone I was a failure who quit her job. They didn't know I'd founded a startup. When the news broke that my company had acquired Dad's firm, his face turned white. "This can't be real," he muttered. I said, "It's business, Dad, not personal." My father's voice echoed across the room loud enough for the guests to hear. "She quit her job. Couldn't handle the pressure." Laughter followed. My mother added, "She's always been a bit fragile." I stood near the doorway holding a tray of drinks, pretending not to hear. But I heard every word. And I remembered every word. They didn't know I'd already registered my company. They didn't know I'd spent the last 6 months working nights, building something from scratch while juggling a job that drained me. They didn't know I'd walked away not because I was weak, but because I was ready. That dinner was supposed to be a celebration for my brother's promotion. The house was full of relatives, neighbors, and old friends. My parents were in their element, bragging, hosting, smiling. I was the shadow in the corner, the one they introduced with a shrug. "She's figuring things out," my mother said when someone asked what I was doing now. I smiled. I always smiled. It was easier than explaining. The truth was, I had walked away from a corporate job that paid well but left me hollow. I had spent years climbing a ladder that leaned against the wrong wall. I had ideas, big ones, but no space to breathe. So I quit. Quietly. Without drama. And they called it failure. At my cousin's engagement party a few weeks later, I stood near the buffet table watching my parents beam with pride as they talked about my siblings. My sister was in finance. My brother was in law. They were proud of them. They were proud of themselves. When someone asked about me, my father chuckled. "She's taking a break." I poured myself a drink and walked outside. The garden was quiet. I sat on a bench under a string of fairy lights and opened my phone. Rachel had just sent over the latest prototype. It looked good. Clean. Functional. We were close. Rachel was the first person who saw me. We met at a co-working space downtown. He was scrappy, brilliant, and blunt. She glanced at my screen one day and said, "That's smart. You building something?" I nodded. "Trying to." She leaned over. "Let's build it together." We started meeting every morning at the cafe next door. We sketched ideas on napkins, built wireframes in her garage, pitched to strangers, and sent cold emails to anyone who might listen. She didn't care about my family's opinions. He cared about the work. That friendship became the foundation of my startup. We didn't have money. We didn't have connections. But we had grit. I didn't tell my parents. They wouldn't have understood. They still thought I was unemployed, drifting, lost. Then came the investor meeting. It was held in a glass-walled conference room on the 14th floor of a downtown building. I wore a blazer I'd borrowed from Rachel and carried a pitch deck I'd rewritten 10 times. My voice shook during the presentation. My hands trembled when I clicked through the slides. But they listened. They asked questions. They nodded. And when we walked out, we had funding. I didn't call home. I didn't share the news. Instead, I bought takeout from my favorite Thai place and walked through the city, letting the night air cool my nerves. I sat on a park bench eating noodles and watching the lights flicker in the windows above. That night something shifted. I wasn't just surviving. I was building. We moved into a tiny office above a bakery. The walls were bare, the carpet was old, and the air smelled like cinnamon rolls. But it was ours. We hung whiteboards, set up folding desks, and worked late into the night. We launched quietly. No press. No fanfare. Just a clean website and a few emails. Orders trickled in. Then they poured. We hit our first milestone in 3 weeks. I watched the dashboard numbers climb while my parents posted vacation photos online. They still thought I was unemployed. Then one night I was scrolling through industry news and saw the headline. "Legacy firm faces client exodus amid market shift." It was my father's company. I clicked the article. Read every word. His firm was losing clients, bleeding cash. The market had changed. They hadn't. I didn't feel joy. I felt clarity. Business was business. Rachel and I sat down with our advisors. We mapped out a plan. We didn't rush. We didn't gloat. We just moved forward. We started running numbers. Making calls. Not out of spite but out of strategy. That was the moment I knew. I wasn't just going to succeed. I was going to change the game. And they'd never see it coming. The smell of fresh paint lingered in the air, mixing with the scent of cinnamon drifting up from the bakery below. Our first office was barely more than a storage closet with windows, but it had a door that locked and enough space for 2 folding desks. Rachel stood on a chair, pinning up a whiteboard while I unpacked a box of mismatched mugs. The carpet was worn, the walls were bare, and the heating barely worked, but it was ours. We didn't have a receptionist or a coffee machine. We had a kettle, a shared Google Calendar, and a dream that felt too big for the room. I remember sitting cross-legged on the floor, scribbling ideas on sticky notes while Rachel paced, muttering about user flow and onboarding friction. We worked late into the night, fueled by instant noodles and ambition. No one knew we were there. And that was fine. We weren't building for applause. I didn't tell my parents about the office. They wouldn't have cared. They were busy planning a cruise to Alaska, posting pictures of glaciers and seafood buffets. My mother sent me a photo of her in a fur-lined coat, smiling beside a ship. "Hope you're doing okay," she wrote. I didn't reply. 3 weeks later we launched. No press. No fanfare. Just a clean website, a few emails, and a quiet hope that someone would notice. The first order came in at 2:17 a.m. I was asleep on the office couch, wrapped in a blanket Rachel had brought from home. She shook me awake, her eyes wide. "We got one," she whispered. I blinked. "One what?" "An order." We stared at the screen together, watching the confirmation page load. It was a small sale. Barely enough to cover lunch. But it was real. By the end of the week we had 20. By the end of the month we had hundreds. I watched the dashboard numbers climb while my parents posted vacation photos online. They still thought I was unemployed. My father sent me a link to a job opening at a bank. "Just in case," he wrote. I didn't reply. One evening Rachel and I attended a tech mixer downtown. It was held in a converted warehouse with exposed brick walls and string lights. The room buzzed with energy. Founders, investors, developers, all talking fast and loud. I wore a blazer I'd borrowed from a friend and tried not to look out of place. That's when I met Claire. She was standing near the bar, sipping sparkling water and scanning the room like she owned it. Someone introduced us. She ran a rival firm to my father's. Sleek, modern, aggressive. She asked about our platform. I gave her the basics. She asked about our growth. I gave her the numbers. She raised an eyebrow. Impressive. We talked for hours. About market trends, user behavior, and the future of automation. She offered a partnership. I didn't mention my last name. I didn't need to. That night I walked home with a strange feeling in my chest. Not pride. Not fear. Just clarity. I had come far. And I was close to something bigger. The deal took months. Lawyers. Meetings. Negotiations. Rachel and I sat through endless calls, reviewed contracts, and debated terms. I kept my name off the surface documents. I didn't want the acquisition to feel personal. It wasn't. It was strategy. When the final papers were signed, we sat in a quiet boardroom with our legal team. The air was still. The table was polished. My father's company was now ours. Rachel looked at me. "You okay?" I nodded. "I'm ready." I didn't feel triumphant. I felt steady. We walked out of the building together, past the receptionist who didn't know who I was. I didn't need her to. The news broke on a Monday morning. Emerging startup acquires legacy firm. My name was in the article. My photo was on the homepage. The write-up was clean, professional, and direct. It mentioned our growth, our innovation, our plans for expansion. It didn't mention my family. Didn't need to. My phone buzzed non-stop. I didn't answer. I waited. Hours later my father called. His voice was quiet. "This can't be real." I paused. "It is." Silence. "You bought us?" "Yes." Another pause. Then, "Why?" I took a breath. "It's business, Dad, not personal." He didn't respond. I heard him exhale. Then the line went dead. I sat on the edge of my bed staring at the phone. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt free. They had celebrated my fall too early. They never saw the rise. He stirred his coffee 3 times before taking a sip. The spoon clinked against the porcelain like a nervous tick. We were seated at a corner table in a restaurant he used to love. White tablecloths, dim lighting, the kind of place he'd take clients to impress them. Now he looked out of place. Smaller somehow. His suit hung looser than I remembered, and his hair had thinned more than I expected. I wore a simple black dress. No jewelry. No makeup beyond a little mascara. I didn't want to look powerful. I wanted to look calm. Taken. He arrived 20 minutes late, muttered something about traffic and sat down without meeting my eyes. The waiter came and went. I ordered confidently. He barely glanced at the menu. "Why didn't you tell us?" he asked finally. I folded my napkin in my lap. "You weren't listening." He looked down at his plate. The silence between us wasn't awkward, it was earned. Years of it. Layered like sediment. "I didn't think it would come to this," he said. I tilted my head. "Come to what?" He didn't answer. That dinner wasn't about reconciliation. It wasn't about closure. It was about recognition. And he knew it. He pushed his food around the plate, barely touching it. I ate slowly, deliberately. I didn't rush. I didn't fill the silence. I let it sit there, heavy and honest. When the check came, I paid. He didn't argue. We stood outside afterward, the night air cool against my skin. He looked at me like he wanted to say something else. Maybe sorry. Maybe not. But he didn't. He just nodded and walked away. I watched him go, then turned and walked the other direction. 2 days later, my mother sent a text. "We're proud of you." No call. No visit. Just a message. I stared at it for a long time. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could have replied. I could have said thank you. But I didn't. Pride wasn't what I needed. I needed truth. And that they never gave me. So I moved on without it. We threw a party at the office that Friday. Nothing fancy. Balloons, music, cupcakes from the bakery downstairs. Rachel brought sparkling cider and a playlist that bounced between indie pop and 90s throwbacks. The team gathered in the common area, laughing, dancing, letting go. Rachel stood on a chair and raised her glass. "To building something from nothing," she said. "And to the woman who made it possible." Everyone turned to me. I felt my face flush. I looked around at the people we'd hired, mentored, grown with. They weren't just colleagues. They were my people. They knew my story, not the version my parents told, but the real one. The one with late nights, missed rent, and quiet victories. That night I felt something I never felt at home. Belonging. A week later, a journalist reached out. She was writing a piece on women in tech and wanted to feature our company. I agreed cautiously. We met in a quiet cafe and she asked thoughtful questions. About the early days. About the risks. About the silence from my family. I told her everything, except their names. "Success isn't about proving people wrong," I said. "It's about proving yourself right." She smiled. "That's going in the headline." The article went viral. My inbox filled with messages from women who felt seen. Who had been dismissed, overlooked, underestimated. They shared their stories, some painful, some triumphant. I read every one. That was the real win. Not the money. Not the headlines. But the connection. The ripple effect. One message stood out. It was from a woman in her 50s who had left her job to start a bakery. Her family called her reckless. She wrote, "Reading your story made me feel less alone." I replied, "You're not. Today I live in a home I chose. It's not big, but it's filled with light. Plants in every corner. Books stacked on every surface. A dog who greets me at the door like I'm the best part of his day. I run a company that reflects my values. We hire with intention. We lead with empathy. We listen. I don't need their approval. I don't need their praise. I built this life from the ground up. And every brick is mine. That, more than anything, is my power.